afternoon, East Coast. Good morning, West Coast. And good afternoon, Texas. Welcome to another week of AVX Live. I'm Joe Guilderson, President of Corporate Audiovisual Services. We're going to talk some tech today, as our guest is a true leader in the broadcast, virtual, and video production world. So we're really excited. You know, we get to really dig into stuff today. Ryan, what do you think?
That's right. Personally, very excited. It's always nice to talk to a kindred spirit, so I'm ready to get into it.
And just in case you guys don't remember that other person on screen, that is Ryan Finch. He came back again this week.
I did. Didn't want to leave you Ryan, too long.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming back. And Ryan, I don't know if I showed you this, but have you seen my backstage camera?
I knew you were going to show it.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, look at the movement going on here.
He's very proud of this.
This is stuff going on
Very
here.
proud of this. Yeah,
well,
clearly stuff.
That's because you guys are really the tech guys, not me. So, and I think we all know that. But look, just to remind everybody, we've been discussing for the last 2 months, really, that our goal behind this program is to encourage information sharing and really continuous growth in our community. We've been having some great conversations with professionals in really all different industries about how they're using technology and audiovisual in their lives, both in the personal and the business side, how they're staying connected, right? Whether it's their target audiences or even family in a lot of scenarios. Last week, I don't know if you guys saw it, but we had on our friend Marie Considine from the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and she was telling us all about how her nonprofit has been using technology to keep their families and their members involved. So it's really interesting just how all this has been unfolding in the last 12 months. And they're doing amazing work. So if you get a chance, please, check them out in NAMI Westchester. But listen, Brian, why don't you tell people how they can go and see those other videos from the past?
Well, that is a good question. Your favorite line, which is please go take a look, subscribe, like, comment, share, all the above, please. It'd be super, super tremendously helpful. We know a lot of you watch this after the fact. Again, any sort of questions, comments, we'd love to respond to them on the next episode. Again, we're doing this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. So if you missed this week, please come back, watch the video, and check us out next time.
Very nice. I was really hoping for you to say smash the subscribe
You know what?
button,
I feel like it's getting repetitive now.
Is it played out now?
Things up. It
okay.
Might be.
All right. Well, I mean, you're the younger generation, so you know the terms a little bit better than me.
That's right.
But listen, so today's guest is really part of our technology and broadcast world. As many of you guys know, we've been involved in streaming events for over 13 years at this point. However, for 12 of those years, we were in a room with the rest of the production team, and it seemed fairly straightforward. For the last year, it's really been a different process. And so when my team was describing to me how we were going to do this and NDI this and what software we're going to use, I kind of glazed over a little bit and said, man, I got to figure this out. And so what did I do? I went to YouTube, right? I went to YouTube, searched up one of the software, groups that everybody had been talking about. And I found this video of this guy. And as he's talking through it, I said, now it all makes sense. I said, this is what they were trying to tell me. And apparently I wasn't the only one, because there was 3,000 other people that watched that same video, which I know doesn't really compare to one of the last videos he did, which had 37,000 views. So again, I think we're talking about someone who really knows what they're doing. And that's why he's here today. So Ryan, I'm going to bring him in if I can, right? Does that work? Can I do some intros?
Yeah. Please.
Okay. All right. Well, please welcome Anthony Burokas, founder and president of IEBA Communications, LLC. He's a 25-year veteran of the production industry and was the engineer and technical director of Flavors of America and Healthy Flavors on PBS. His award-winning outdoor adventure series, Wilderness Adventures Off the Beaten Path, is available at retail stores in Alaska. He's published his own entertainment production magazine, Filmadelphia, blogged for camcorderinfo.com, and has been published in several magazines over the years, including New Media, Camcorder and Computer Video, and American Cinematographer. Anthony continues to be a contributing editor for Streaming Media, He writes articles, reviews gear, produces videos, and gives seminars, including his very popular recent one, 100+ tips for live streaming professionals. I can see why that would be a hot topic right now.
Yes.
Based in Dallas, Texas area, his daily work includes corporate training, special event video, and of course, creative video production as a hobby. Who has time for hobbies right now? Anthony also created Frisco Studios, which is a rentable soundstage, which was home to Frisco Arts Friday, a live entertainment news magazine show that featured local artists, interviews, and performances. Since he has seen the need for similar services outside the studio, Anthony created Stream for Us, focusing solely on multi-camera, live switched, recorded, and streamed productions. He's traveled the United States providing production and streaming services, and more recently, he's taken his services to the cloud, providing streaming and recording services to clients around the world. And Ryan, as you said about the cloud,
nobody understands the cloud. Got it.
All right, I appreciate you hitting that one. That was good.
Yeah,
listen, please welcome Anthony Burokas.
I don't understand the cloud.
Well, that's right. Nobody does. So there you go. You fit right in.
No one can be told what the cloud is.
It's all very mysterious. I mean, it's up there. It's up there someplace, you know?
Well, and you know what? I do work for a local studio as well, and there's been times when I've remoted into the studio, and it's like you come to think of it, well, technically that's my cloud. You know, it's like I know where the computer is, and I know what it is, but I'm using that virtual computer from my home office, and I'm controlling the show from there, and technically that's a cloud.
So it's kind of like your own personal cloud.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. Maybe not. Sorry. Didn't land. All right. I'll see you guys.
Listen, you've been a hard guy to get a hold of, Anthony. I mean, have you been busy or something?
It has been busy. I mean, I think anyone that's been doing remote production has been very busy with the amount of people who want to do things. Although right now in the U.S., as things sort of lighten up in terms of restrictions, people are talking now. They're planning hybrid events. So there's an in-person element, but then there's still a large remote element out there, and it's even more tricky to bring that together. It's one thing to do it where you have everything in place and you've got it built out, sort of like your studio, Joe. Hey, I got everything figured out. I know where everything is. All my buttons work and everything, and I'm good. It's another thing.
Did I show you?
Yeah, you did.
Sorry.
It's another thing to say, hey, yeah, we need that at a hotel. Right. And you don't know what you don't have there until you get there and you start to build it, and you're like, oh yeah, well, your bandwidth here is not what we need. We need more,
Right. A far cry from your own personal cloud.
Yeah. It's a little bit more challenging when you don't know the situation where you're going to be, and you have to be as reliable as the kit that you've taken months to set up and iron everything out.
That's a real challenge, and certainly one that everybody's going to run into very quickly soon. So now I know that Texas is open at this point. Is that true?
The governor says go for it, but then different counties and different cities have said no, not just yet. So it's a hodgepodge of things all over the place. Like some stores are like, sure, we don't care. Other stores are like, wear a mask. So it's, you got to be at the ready. You got to phone ahead and find out what situations are and what you can do and what you can't do at different places. I don't know of events that are like, all right, let's fill up the auditorium. Let's have fun just yet. But, I know, who was it? Was just somebody was just in Las Vegas that I know, and they were like, well, let's check out the Strip. Let's see if it's opening back up yet. And they started to drive down the Strip and said they went like one block and turned around and left because it was wall to wall people. Wow. And majority of them were not wearing masks, and they're like, yeah, we don't need this. We could just order in and stay home.
Right.
Yeah, well, I think after you've waited so long at this point, like you don't want to go backwards.
No.
You just we got to want to move forward at some point here, you know.
Yeah, it's
But
like we putting the cart before the horse. Let's get more people vaccinated. Let's make sure we're really on the downward trend, and then start to open the gates. Let's not jump to conclusions yet.
Right.
yeah, definitely a
Wouldn't
challenge.
be done.
Definitely a challenge. So, hey, let me ask you. You know, the things you were doing with PBS really interested me. How did you get into the broadcast world and start working with PBS?
It was to clarify. I wasn't working for PBS. PBS.
Okay.
They have a different way. PBS does produce content like Sesame Street, and those things are produced by PBS. But the majority of content that you see on PBS is produced independently and funded independently, and then made available to PBS broadcast. So our show was produced independently. I worked with the producer who conceptualized the show, and we put it together. He sold it. We had the sponsors that covered the production. We made it available to PBS, and then when enough stations on PBS carry you, you can then take those numbers back to the sponsors and say, hey, listen, I can guarantee you 5.4 million households of this age graphic, demographics and all that stuff. And then you can ask for the money, which then gets, one thing feeds another, feeds another. So that works back and forth. But that's how PBS worked back when I was doing stuff for PBS.
Sure. And it's funny because there are some crossovers in terms of getting sponsorships to cover the production end that we see on the nonprofit side for doing these virtual fundraisers that we've been involved with. Out of curiosity, and in the broadcast TV world, which is really a world we know very little of, frankly, is that typical for a network like PBS? Is that structure where you're just trying to get a product together and hoping it gets picked up?
There's multiple different models. Like PBS is different than broadcast. And so when we produced our show, we produced for PBS and broadcast at the same time. PBS, you couldn't name a product in the show, whereas commercial, you could say, hey, we're going to add some, Filippo Barrio olive oil and and everything. So we would have, for instance, we would do the same cooking segment, but we would have a couple variables. So if Filippo Barrio was one of the sponsors, for the PBS version, we'd have a bottle without a label, and we'd put some olive oil in. We'd stop, we'd clean it off, and then we'd redo that segment. And then we're going to add some Filippo Barrio olive oil, and then we'd edit two different versions of the same show, one for PBS, one for commercial. In the commercial version, there's multiple ways you can do it. You can do a share for syndication. What you do is some of the commercial avails are yours, and so the show comes with like a 60-40 split. I made the show, a station is available to air it for free, but you get 40% of the commercial avails. I get 60. So I'm selling 60% of the advertising, which pays for the production. So that's usually how syndication works. And then for actual commercial broadcast, like network TV and things like that, they do things where they make it available. It's all available for sale, but then they're pre-selling the shows. So Procter & Gamble wants to pay, however much, or the Super Bowl, $1 million for 30 seconds or something like that. That's where those numbers come into play.
Wow.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. So before the pandemic hit, what kind of stuff were you working on?
I was doing a lot of fishing. No. I was, I had several corporate things lined up, and I was gearing up and building kits for this sports competition that was going to take place every month in a different arena across the country. And we were going to use the TriCaster and pan-tilt zoom cameras and a complement of, handheld cameras and maybe some point and shoot, specific spot cameras. And we were going to, mix this all together. We were going to record it. We were going to stream it, and they were going to sell it, for broadcast. So we were going to shoot the whole thing and stream the whole thing, and then they were going to condense it down into a broadcast because, a sporting competition might take 3 hours, but you would condense it down into like a 1 hour show. And so that's what we're gearing up for. And then COVID kind of started rolling in January, and they started pushing it back. And then that, like so everything else that was in person, that all just went away. And I, like many other people who work in an event industry like that, we were all like twiddling our thumbs. And I had people start to contact me and say, listen, we want to, we're not having our regular monthly meeting, but we want to have something. So is there a way we can bring people in, like do a Zoom? And, but then everybody jumped on Zoom. And then people got tired of things looking like Zoom, and so they would contact, producers and say, listen, what can we do? And I said, well, listen, I can do something. And, we started looking at ways we can bring in a lot of remote people, StreamYard obviously being one of them, and make it look a little bit better than a big Zoom grid of people talking. And, I say that, but now when we think of Zoom and when we think of WebEx and Teams and stuff like that, we're like, well, no, you can kind of do that stuff. Well, yeah, now, a year later, you can do that. But a year ago, all those business chat apps were like caught completely off guard. They were like, yeah, you sign in and you see a grid of people, and that's it. That's all the control you got. And they've since added a lot of better functionality for people who like to have control. And I want to pin somebody and make sure that they are full screen. I want to have two people pinned side by side. All these features were added as the year went along. So those things all came later. In the dawn of, February and March and April, it was sort of like, if you wanted to have like control, you needed to go to like a broadcast app or something like that and really bring people into that to be able to like do your box and solo and things like that. And I looked around at the tools that were available. Like I said, I had a TriCaster, and I was like, okay, how can I get remote people into this? Because I know Skype has a connection to TriCaster. All right, so how do I do that? And you just need a computer for each Skype instance. Oh, okay, well that's going to get kind of expensive. Oh, look, NewTek has this box called the Talk Show 4000, and it'll bring in 4 people. How much is that? It's $8,000. Okay. What other options are there out there? And I started to look around, and vMix, at their top tier, which I think is $1,200, was like, we'll bring 8 people. And I was like, cost per person, that's right. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Certainly better than the alternatives. Yes.
Yeah. And I looked around, there's, what's the Vimeo one? Livestream Producer, there's OBS, there's, there's Wirecast, there's, there are lots of solutions. I'm not, here to sell any solution. And, being a writer, I have to disclose, I'm not being paid by anybody to mention any products. I have no tie-in with anyone, because that's like a real thing, because I have a podium with the magazine. Whenever I do promote something, I have to tell people like, this product was provided to me for this review. At the end of this review, give it back and everything. So I don't get to keep like the majority of stuff.
To keep it?
No, and it's so funny because it'll be like 2 years later, and somebody will be like, "Yeah, I saw your camera review. How does it compare to this one?" I'm like, "Dude, I had a camera for 3 weeks, 2 years ago. I don't know. I'm sorry. That's it's like I write for streaming media, and that's part of the review. The review process is I review it and I give it back. Right. It's not like you get to keep everything."
That's kind of like a missed opportunity from my perspective. We need to all the manufacturers out there, please give Anthony something that he can play with longer, because he'll fly your flag. Stuff. Yeah, I mean, look, he can name drop in lowly shows like ours, and just kind of spread that message across. But in all seriousness, it is funny because your trajectory in terms of where you found yourself to where you ended up. I mean, I personally, I was in Texas, believe it or not, in mid-February, working on the very last program that we worked on in person. That little did I know that, and then we found ourselves, in the same kind of situation where we're literally just like trying things out and, taking what were typically the tools we would use and trying to make them fit these somewhat new applications and leading us down rabbit holes left and right. And so, I certainly can relate to that. I am curious. Oh, hi, Ken. There we go. We're getting some audience there. Also, I have to mention this because while we were talking about the cloud, we had another colleague of ours. Isn't it just someone else's computer? I have no idea, because nobody understands the cloud. So thank you, Jim. We can't help you with that one. In any case, I'm curious to know if you saw this from your clients and people you worked with, where in the very beginning it was, what can we do? And now it's more like, all right, well, what else you got? Have you seen that, where now it's like you have to kind of continuously push the boundaries of what you're able to do?
I would agree with that. At the very beginning, it was sort of like one of the first things I did was this open mic night, and it was like, wow, we need to bring in 12 performers, and I'm like, yeah, okay, even that's above what I can do. So we actually ended up bringing Zoom into the video app, where I did the overlays and the title slides and everything like that. But my camera switch was a computer with Zoom coming into a second device, which was the streaming, and that going out to the streaming platform. And I mean, it worked. It did the job. I think in the beginning, it's more like, I know what I want to do. How do I get there? Yeah. And now that we've been doing it so long, it's almost more like, okay, I have this base of knowledge now. I know I have these capabilities, and you start looking at the nuances and like other things that I can do to make my role as a producer better or more fluid and easier. Like, one of the things that I'm getting into now is, it's like, yeah, I have my software tool and I've got my buttons for the show, but now it's like, well, I've got remote callers. And what would really be cool is if I had a second little control surface, which is not in front of me, and I dedicated buttons just for calls, and where I could solo talk to each person. So if I have somebody come on to the show late and they're just getting on while everybody's already in the show, I don't talk back to all of them. I can talk back to just that one. So it's like, all right, now, it's like, let me build more, make it easier for me to do a better job for the client. It's like, I always say, it's like, we make you look awesome. That's the slogan for my company. And it's like, I can do a better job of that if I don't interrupt everyone else with the talkback or the behind the scenes. Yes, you're welcome, Will. It's like, on one hand, it's making it easier for me, but if I make it easier for me, I'm also finding ways that improves the what I'm delivering for the client, because that's really the goal. Is it's like, I want to have a better show. I want to have it more polished. I want to have more capability. And then, and as we're saying this, there's new tools always coming out, things that are refined. Like when I first started, working with vMix in particular, it was sort of like, oh, I have to build everything. And now there's a bunch of companies out there with pre-made templates, dozens of pre-made templates that'll handle 10 people. And that just makes it, really easy to have a better look for someone, because these new things are coming out, and it's always trying to be aware of what else is out there and keep your ear to the ground. And I always say, like, there's people out there who are in the business and just do the work, but then there's also a lot of people who are involved in forums and groups and everything, and that works both ways, because I'm always learning from other people who ask questions, and I find out about a solution I didn't know about, and it's always useful for me to then, because maybe it comes from the writing background, but when somebody has a question and I have the answer, and it's like, listen, here's this, like somebody just, texted me the other day. It says, we're having a problem where our app quits, unexpectedly. I says, well, I've read other people complain about a very same thing, and it turned out to be NDI, with a dirty NDI that messes up the program, and the program just freaks out, and it says, if you can find ways to like change out your NDI source, use a different converter, come in through a USB converter as opposed to NDI, that may provide you better reliability. So, like, I hear one thing and I pass it on to someone else who might not have heard that. So that's one of the key things as well.
Right.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's funny. A lot of people in the AV side, which is really our direction coming into this, like they were traditionally deathly afraid of that Cat 5 or Cat 6 going into the wall. Like they were. We like buttons, like we like big buttons to hit.
Things you can hold.
They were afraid of streaming for years. I know since you're coming from the broadcast side in, it's probably a little different. How did you get into streaming the corporate gigs from that direction?
Well, from the broadcast side, the broadcast side is mainly through a production company. And production companies have always had part of the production work for corporations, because corporations need AV work done, either it's in-house or they're contacting local production companies. So working for local production companies and networking and, finding local companies and, getting your name, into those companies can help people, be a person that local production companies can call when they need someone. There's a local production company, and I was referred to them by somebody who I worked with on a production job, and then they called me and says, "Hey, listen, we have this client who's doing this massive conference, and they have, they're doing it all in StreamYard, like this show, but they are handling, 20 different sessions at the same time. They need producers, to just push the buttons in StreamYard, because it's like, oh yeah, we have someone who knows StreamYard. Yeah, but you don't have 20 versions of you at the same time. You need more yous." And that's when they bring in people to help, run shows. And so I've done that a couple of times for a local production company. And then they know me as someone who can do streaming, who understands, various concepts. And then, that, helps being aware of who can do what in your local community helps. So if you have camera operators who are not necessarily streaming people, just telling them, hey, listen, I need to know camera operators, because if I get hired to do a hybrid job and I'm doing the streaming part, I need camera operators. So, it's like it takes all skill sets to, bring a production together. And the AV is something I don't do. It's like people come to me and say, oh yeah, and what type of screens do you have? I'm like, yeah, don't do screens, don't do projectors. I don't do sound. I don't do mics. It's like,
right.
There are people who do that. Very talented, very capable people who have warehouses full of equipment and drapes and pipes and lights and stuff. Not me.
Yeah. Well, I hear, and it's funny because that comes up a little bit for us on the AV side, or it had came up a few times for us on the AV side, where it's like, a different type of production that is not the same thing, like theater. Right? Like AV and theater are similar, but they are not the same thing. We sometimes have different words for the same thing and different roles called different things and so on and so forth. But what it sounds like you're getting to, and what I'm curious to know what you'd say to is, would you say that the people in general are the product in this case? Because we talked about, 8 different computers and $8,000 boxes and new toys and gadgets, but in many cases on the corporate side, it sounds like they need, reliability, trust, and people who can actually execute things like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, for my type of clients, like I'm not in-house at any particular company. When you're in-house, you might deal with different departments as your clients, but you are providing a base level of service. Whereas if you're outside of that, the ask that comes into you is very different every single time. So the requirement of what you need to be aware of and know how to solve is much larger when you're freelance and you're external to a company. Whereas when you're internal to a company, it's sort of like, this is what we do, this is what we do, and this is what we do. We either do a WebEx or we do an in-person, or so you're sort of like, okay, I got these 3 things down, we're good, and you just keep handling the next one that comes along with a little bit of variation here and there. For what I do, it's like, one gig I'm doing StreamYard from my home office. The next gig I am, taking, a purpose-built vMix multi-camera live switch for 4 SDIs and 5 remotes coming into a hybrid into a studio that has the soundstage and has the live switching capability. They don't necessarily have the ability to handle the remote calls. So they do everything in the studio, and then they hand it off to me to bring in the remote calls. So it's like it's switched and then switched again before it's handed off. And then the last part was, it was actually not even broadcast. It was handed off. We ingested it as virtual camera into WebEx, which is what the client needed for the behind the firewall clients. Their audience, their employees who watch, they were all watching from behind the firewall. So it was an using a chat tool like that as our distribution method, as opposed to like a commercial thing like Vimeo or using a public thing like YouTube.
Right.
Well, I know on our side, we've seen so many different platforms. And that's of course the term platform. It may not be a platform, but that's the word that's used. But I mean, I know from most of the time we see the basics, the Zoom and the Teams and, various other things, and we stream here and there and everywhere. But have you noticed any one being more useful to you than another?
I think it varies. I mean, they're not one doesn't necessarily, it's not more useful, because usually I'm handing it off to the business chat app to be the content delivery network, or as we say, CDN in the streaming world.
Right.
So the CDN, once I hand it off to the CDN, it's sort of out of my hands. It's sort of like I've handed it off, and now it's somebody else's responsibility. I will say that, like, WebEx lacks a pin command, whereas Zoom, the owner of the event can pin my input and force everyone, this is what you're going to watch. Whereas WebEx, for whatever reason, doesn't have that. I'm like,
oh, WebEx.
Why not? So, it's like, it has to go, like the one we did at the studio was WebEx, and it was like, we had instructions. Everybody who came in had to turn off your camera, and everybody had to turn off their mic, so that, and then you have to set it to full screen, so that that way WebEx will automatically default to full screen the one thing that has the camera on, which was my feed. But it's like all of this workaround to do what is simply pin an input and make that for full screen. But that's just the way they built their thing, and I don't find one necessarily more useful than another. It varies dependent upon the client too, because some clients may standardize on Teams, some clients may standardize on WebEx, some clients may standardize on Zoom. And I've had people try to come to me on when I'm producing in vMix, and it's like, okay, vMix, and it doesn't work because they've got a firewall. And then it says, oh, well, okay, so let's just try Zoom. And it doesn't work on Zoom because they have a firewall. And the lady's like, well, why don't you people just use Teams? Because Teams works. And I'm like, well, Teams works because your IT department made a special allowance for this. And they made Teams work with your firewall, and they made your firewall work with Teams. So we actually had to bring this one lady in to my vMix, Teams hooked into vMix and output into Zoom, which was what the client wanted for distribution. And so, yeah, my computer was working overtime trying to hook into two different business chat apps at the same time.
Oh, I feel that pain. As you're mentioning vMix, I think we have a question from the audience here.
Are you going back to the TriCaster, or do you have a vMix hardware solution worked out? That's actually a really good question. I get to say it. Because it has actually been in my mind. I like TriCaster. It is easy to implement. It is very solid. The thing is, it's quick to be up and running because a TriCaster interface is fixed. Here's your inputs. Here's your outputs. Here's your overlays. Here's your playback. Your whole setup is basically done. But the challenge comes when doing hybrid events. I mean, I've already paid for vMix. vMix is done, just like the TriCaster. I bought it. It's mine. It's not a license. So I have that flexibility. The challenge with vMix is when you open vMix, it's like opening a Word document and it's empty.
Yeah.
And you build each thing for each show. Now, there are templates out there, like I said, and I'm working on building more generalized templates that I can then configure for particular uses. So it's trying to find ways that I can take an existing project and modify it for a client and be like 80% of the way there without having to rebuild from scratch every time.
Yeah.
But I definitely think, like I have a TriCaster Mini. I don't have the $15,000 TC1. I have the Mini. And I've had this thing when I built my studio, I built it around the TriCaster because, at the time, that was one of the big knowns in the production world. So I went with that. And it has worked very reliably for me. I can't knock TriCaster, but if I need to incorporate remotes, or if I need to be like, oh well, we want to have a hybrid where there's only one remote, but we need like 5 across. To do it on a TriCaster is like, well, I can take one ME and I can do across, and then I can do this, and then I have to bring that into. It's a real hard workaround. Whereas the vMix, it's sort of like every input has 10 layers, and you can do whatever you want with 10 layers. Mm-hmm. So I can have unlimited MEs. I can have unlimited things on a button, as many buttons as I want. So there's so much power in terms of what I can do in a tool like vMix or Wirecast. Again, I'm not promoting any particular app. The software tools allow greater flexibility and greater capability at the expense of you having to build it for the client each time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think everybody's starting to think through this process at this point, and that's why it's such a valid question, because and then I think, well, is that going to be roadworthy if we do this, that, and the other thing? And then we go into a convention center and somebody lifts that case off the truck. And I've seen some tragedies happen. So, and these are delicate
my TriCaster,
they are.
I built my TriCaster into a case, and I've deployed it a couple times. And, even under COVID, we did a production where they were doing something, and they were doing an event that was going to be live, but they were pre-recording everything, and they wanted multi-camera live switch pre-recorded. So I just brought the TriCaster. We were just switching cameras, and it was going to be edited later. So I didn't have to worry about playback and graphics and picture-in-picture and all this stuff. Right. I just DDR'd everything, and that worked out great. And so, it's built into a case with, a router and PoE and UPS and everything. It's ready to deploy. And, it really just comes down to, the needs of a project. And I also have like iPad-based tools that I've used for like really small things. It's like, listen, it's like we just, have a couple iPhones, and I can switch between cameras and do graphics on an iPad with certain tools. I've got like multiple different levels of gear, and there's no, people ask me, what's the one thing I need to get? What's the one thing? I have like 5 different solutions, and I don't take one solution to each thing. I take, if I need a screwdriver, I bring a screwdriver. If I need a wrench, I bring a wrench. I don't ask a screwdriver. I don't bring a screwdriver to do a wrench's job.
Well, I know that we get asked that similar kind of question comes up, and well, can't you just do it like this? So let's go through the whole process first. Let's see what we're really trying to do here before we can't just say use this just yet. We're not there yet. Let's think it through first, and then we'll come up with an answer that will work. That's all.
Yeah, and people come, and it's like, streaming, it's like building a house or buying a car. It's like, well, how much does a stream cost? How many cameras do you have? I mean, literally, I actually had a guy on the phone, and he was like, I just need a cost for how much the stream is going to cost. I said, well, how many cameras? It's just a couple cameras. Well, how much does it cost? And it's like, after like 5 minutes with this guy, listen, if you can't give me the answers and I don't know what I'm actually need to provide, I can't give you a price. I literally can't do that. I can't just like, you want $15,000.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out later.
Number. There you go. Yeah.
But it was, he actually got like angry with me because it was like, why do you keep asking me all these questions? I says, because they're all relevant.
Right.
Yeah, well, we're used to people getting angry with us. Everybody's angry in New York, so they're always saying stuff like that. But I guess, so what are some of the things? I mean, you talk to a lot of people. You're in communication with a lot of people in the streaming world. What are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing in the streaming world right now, and these remote events specifically?
Biggest mistakes I see in remote events. I think the producers who are doing remotes, I think by and large they've really gotten it down by this point. We've had a year of doing this. We've figured out the tools. We figured out different tools for different things. It's like you're using StreamYard for this as opposed to using vMix or TriCaster. So, you've got like certain tools for certain tasks. And we're like, okay, kind of have that down. And we know what various levels of production are going to cost. And we know what sort of resources we have available. I think really the mistakes I see most are more related to guests.
Right.
It's guests who treat, when we're trying to make a show and we're trying to make them look good, but they're treating it like a Zoom meeting. And it's like, each of us have a specific spot. We have good lighting. It's quiet. And we've got a setup in front of us. And, when I tell people, listen, don't do this in your kitchen. Don't do this in the hallway. Don't do this, with windows. Don't do this with windows behind you. Don't,
right.
Wear headphones. I'm wearing an earbud. You're wearing earbuds. Yeah. He's wearing, and everything. That's how we make sure we get the best audio, is because the audio from the show is not coming into the microphone. It's like there's certain best practices, and there's a web page I created on my website that tell people, like, please dress nice, wear a nice shirt, just show up. And it's called.
So how did I do? Is this okay? I mean,
yeah, right.
Right.
I don't know. The light behind you is a little bright. I would.
That's it. Boom.
Well, I'm sorry. Which light is it? I mean, do we have to go to the scene again?
There you go.
Look, the blue light that's glowing behind you.
The blue light that's behind. Okay, I got it.
Listen, young Padawan.
Yeah, right. Well, it's funny you say that too, Anthony, about the guests being sort of that X factor that a lot of programs kind of live and die by, right? It's the commitment level that we get from them is how good of a job we can do for them. And unfortunately, It's like if everyone isn't playing that at that level, or if everyone isn't making that level of commitment, it's all weighed down by that one crappy presenter, right? And it's unfortunate.
It's not just a crappy presenter. It's also like having the time to have a tech check with each person to make sure they have good internet, that they're not blocked by a firewall, that they're in the right location, that they have earbuds. It's like we send it out in an email, and then we give a link to the page, and then, other people make a video. No matter what you do, 80% of them are going to ignore it. And you get to that time when you do the tech check, and it says, hey, yeah, do you have headphones? What do I need headphones for? Okay, in the email and in the video and on the phone, we told you. Now, I'm telling you again, please find earbuds.
Right.
And yes, like you said, it's up to the producer to like really. It's like, listen, my job here is to make you look awesome, and help me help you.
Jerry Maguire reference, nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
and it's like I feel that every single time,
Yeah. Well,
and after the event, I say, show me the money.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for. There we go. And honestly, in terms of mistakes, one thing we've seen a lot, and I don't know if this is something that you get involved with a lot, truthfully, is they don't do a good enough job promoting this event ahead of time. And in your work with background, in your production background with TV and whatnot, trying to get your shows picked up, obviously there's a lot of legwork that needs to get or needs to go behind making this show successful beyond just the pushing the buttons. Any recommendations, anything you've seen done well, not done well, as far as promotion in this virtual setting?
For things going out to the public, I find like I've done a show in my studio called CorporateAV Live, which you had mentioned. And, we were thinking the organization had a page of 3,000 people. And, oh, yeah, we're going to put this out on Facebook. 3,000 people are going to get a notification, and they're all going to tune in. It's going to have a huge audience. Oh, yeah. And we would have an audience of less than 50.
Yeah.
Every single time, less than 50. And a good portion of them were people related to or who knew somebody in the show. So oh yeah, I know so-and-so, I'm going to watch this because they're in it. It wasn't just people tuning in. Now, Frisco Arts Friday Live was aired during lunchtime during the week, so people were at work, so that's not necessarily audience time. But then again, if you have it at night, people want to go out at night. Streaming is not like television. It's a harder buy-in. And so the first key thing is I think you really have to have an audience already. So if you're a musician and you have audience, if you're an organization and you have an audience, you have to like, put it out there. Like you guys just like, listen, we have our clients and we can put this out on our newsletter. We can put this out on our webpage. We can like, let people know, hey, yeah, we've got this like show where we're letting people, and you have to build awareness manually. It's not going to happen automatically. It's not like people tuning into one show and seeing a commercial for another show. We're not a network. It's what in the streaming they call OTT, over the top. I don't know what the top of what it is. It just means it's not part of the broadcast network. Over the top, OTT. That's what streaming media calls it. And the industry term, I don't quite get it, but I use it anyway. So you have to like manually build that audience, and you have to manually let them know, even to the point of like, I'm a ham radio operator. Just to throw another thing in there, it's another gear thing. I'm a ham radio operator, and we have regular meetings. Every month we still have our meeting, and it's on Zoom. And, last month we had an issue where a lot of people couldn't get in. And that was because, we put the one person was like, I put the meeting link on a slide in the PowerPoint for the meeting. And it was like, you send out an email, and then, we came to the point where like 5 minutes before the meeting or 10 minutes before the meeting, you send out another email, because this is not the only thing going on in people's lives. They could have a lot of other emails coming in, and that email you sent out last week is 300 down. It's way the hell down there. It may have a star next to it, but that don't matter. You need to have like, I need that. I need that link. I want to click on it. You got to like send it out again. The local production organization called the Dallas Producers Association, they are excellent at this. I have to admit, they are phenomenal. It's like they have third Thursday breakfast. You'll get a notification a week before, the Monday before, the Wednesday before, the day of, that there's this there's this morning breakfast meeting, and the nighttime meeting, the regular member meeting at night. You'll get it 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 1 week out. You get it over and over and over again, because people got stuff going on in their lives. So you can't be like, I sent out a notice. I don't know why nobody came. Because in this online world, it's like we're competing against everything else in life,
Everything else.
And not to sound, it's not adversarial, but, that's like we were saying, like, I have this meeting, but at the same time, we had house construction going on. So right before the meeting, there was like band jigsaw stuff going on right above my head. And I was like, I don't know. That's the way, okay? That's the way things are. And, so people need to do the promotion themselves. And then the other half of that is, yes, we had a very small live audience. But the second half of that is don't despair. Because it's social, because it's online, the majority of the views happen after the fact. And at the end of the year, I actually went back to the Frisco Arts Association page, and I looked at all of their videos that were uploaded, all of their lives, and actually looked at them, and all of the lives charted around 800 views, average, not counting mine. All the videos they did charted around 800. Some were like 1,500, 800. Most were much lower, 500 or 300 or something like that. So they had this, average of 800. And then you looked at the shows that we produce, the good content that, whether they put a money push behind it or not, and this is just Facebook, this is not counting YouTube. The shows averaged 5,000 or more views per show. The first show in the series had the longest time on there, had like 9,800 views. And that was actually the roughest show production-wise, because it was our first show. So understand that even after something happens, continue to promote it, because that stuff lives on. It's online. And, like people love to binge watch. People love to TiVo. People love to like DVR stuff. Streaming has the same advantage. Yes, it's live stream. We did it live. There's no post-production, but it doesn't mean after it's done, you just like walk away from it. You continue to promote it. Hey, did you catch the talk? It was a great talk. You can find it here at this link, and continue to promote it after the fact, because then people who missed it, I wanted to go to that, something came up. I wasn't able to see it live. oh yeah, there was this thing last Tuesday. Let me go and follow this link, or let me bookmark it. I'll come back to it. Because that I find is you get, based on that show alone, their average of 800, and every show I had was over 5,000. The post-event audience opportunity is huge.
I think you're absolutely right. And we've seen the same thing from our side, that there may not be the, thousands of viewers that someone may have been expecting that evening, but they are getting a lot of people watching afterwards because they had other things in their lives that they just had to deal with. The kids were home, they're schooling them at home. Somebody else, is traveling. There's just a lot of moving parts right now. So, but, I know that you're also doing a lot of different product demos and for, like you'd mentioned, the different magazines. I mean, how did you get into doing these product demos?
Well, to clarify, I have done product demos. Just checking. I have not checking time. I'm messages. Product demos are different than the reviews that I do. So if I do a review or a tech video, that is sort of looking at a product as a solution for people. I'm not really doing a tech demo. However, I have worked with companies, and I've got several different companies who I'm working with where we are specifically doing pointed solutions. Let's do a demo of how this software works with the hardware, demo it, and we'll make a video because they've seen my videos and they say we like how he does presentations, and we think he'd do a good video for us. So that's where that comes into play. But when I do a product review for streaming media, that's more of, somebody's got a new product out and we're reviewing it, but it's not necessarily done for the manufacturer as a product demo. It's more done as a review based on my experience. So I'm not like covering aspects of it. I'm not like instructing you how to do things. I don't go through. There's lots of different ways to do a product. There could be something out there, and it's like, hey, let's just say Bird Dog has a new camera, and this new 4K camera. Somebody might do like, oh, look at the great zoom range, look at the color space, look at all the great functions, and this is how it does RS-32. This is thing. Somebody else might say, hey, let's just look at how we can control it or how we match different cameras through software. So it's less about the camera and more about the software. And somebody else might do like, let's just do, hey, how do you use pan-tilt zoom cameras with the TriCaster? And you could see, this is how the TriCaster and TriCaster version AE3 versus AE2, how they deal with pan-tilt cameras is very different. So, that's sort of an instruction video that's not really about the camera, but more about the controller. So there's lots of different ways that you can have the same product talked about. So there's, Well,
I think it's interesting, but the reality is I think you come across incredibly well on camera, and I think you explain things, and I think you're looking at it from both sides. And just like you're mentioning, is it the software? Is it the hardware? Is it how it communicates with the other toys? But I think that's why you're doing so well. No, but that's exactly it. Look, you helped me learn, what this software, my guys were trying to tell me that I'm like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but you helped me learn it. And so I figure that let me survive another year. But either way, listen, I don't want to tie you up too much longer, Anthony. You've been great, and we really appreciate having you on the show. And I know I think there's a long future ahead, and we're all learning every day. So we appreciate your time very much. We're going to wrap up because, we try to keep these things under an hour here, and we're closing in on the clock. So, but thank you again, Anthony, for stopping by and seeing us today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys and, learn a little bit how you're seeing it from the AV side of it as well. I think there's lots of different, whether from broadcast or AV or from production or corporate, there's lots of different avenues that all end up needing the same tool set.
I agree completely. Very good. Very good. Well, Ryan, I'm going to let you take us out of the show today.
All right. Well, as with every week, We would love for you to please come back, take a look next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. We'll have another guest for you. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, all the above. I'll say it to them blue in the face. It's super, super helpful. And of course, bookmark it. Come on back and take a look at the recap if you missed it, just like Anthony said earlier. So we'd love to get in front of more people. So if you could help us do that, it'd be much appreciated.
And a final big thank you to Anthony Burokas from Stream. You guys can check out Anthony's site, stream4.us. See what he did there with that stream for us? He's pretty good, right?
See what you did there.
He's good at this. So listen, again, check him out. Look on YouTube. This guy's got 1 million videos. He will help you better understand some of the tools that you're using for streaming. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next Wednesday.
Take care.